Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 114, noes 5.
The bill is passed.
Assembly Number 5235B, Calendar 202, Mr. Avenanti, an act to direct the Department of Transportation to conduct a study of level-grade rail crossings.
An explanation is requested, Mr. Avenatti.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. This bill would require the Department of Transportation to conduct a statewide study of highway railroad grade crossings to determine whether adequate safety measures exist to prevent collisions between trains and motor vehicles.
Mr. Murray,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for a few questions, please?
will you yield, Mr. Avenatti?
Surely, Mr. Speaker.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. Mr. Avenatti, do you have an idea, or do we have an idea of how many grade crossings there are across the state of New York?
I don't know the exact number, but I think the governor was recently quoted as saying there were some 5,000 in the state of New York. I'm not sure if that number is accurate.
Okay. And do we have an idea of how many cars or vehicles cross over those grade crossings, say on a, I don't know, a daily or even a monthly or yearly basis?
I do not.
Guesstimate?
I have no guesstimate at all.
Okay. Would it be safe to say probably hundreds of thousands on a daily basis?
It may be more.
Okay. Very good. Do we have an idea of how many accidents or serious accidents occur on a daily or monthly or yearly basis on the railroad crossings?
I don't have those numbers, but I do know that there have been several in my district over the last few years, and several people were killed.
Right.
And if we could prevent an accident similar to the one that happened in Valhalla just about a year ago, or the one that almost happened in Chappaqua Crossing a few weeks after that, and the one that happened in Chappaqua Crossing a few years before that, I think this bill would be worthwhile.
Yeah, there were definitely some serious serious accidents, and we've heard about several of those. But again, we're having hundreds of thousands, if not more, vehicles crossing over these rail crossings on a daily basis, and minimal accidents. But do we have an idea of how much this study might cost?
Far less than it's going to cost the MTA to pay the damages as a result of the lawsuits that have resulted because of that situation in Valhalla. But I would disagree with you that there are very few accidents. There are actually a lot of accidents around the state that we read about. They just, fortunately, are not as serious as the ones that we're talking about.
But we don't have any actual numbers.
Well, that's part of the reason we're asking the Department of Transportation to do a study. They're going to come back and report to us exactly what is happening out on the roads. How many accidents are there? How many of them are related to the design of these grade crossings? And in those situations where there's a problem, they can make suggestions on how to resolve the problem.
But my guess is if there were accidents, then there would be police reports. We would already have those numbers. They would already exist. Do we need a study, an additional study, to get those numbers?
Well, sir, if you hadn't noticed, I've only been an assemblyman for 6 years. I don't have a staff large enough to do that study.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I said I've only been an assemblyman for 6 years. I don't have a large enough staff to conduct that study statewide.
Oh,
That's why I'm asking the Department of Transportation to do it.
I can definitely relate to that. Now, back to the funding issue of this, but do we have an idea of where the funding for this study would come from?
This would be included in the Department of Transportation's budget. I'm sure if they don't have the money, they'll come back and ask for it, but we're hopeful that they have a sufficient amount of money. I have confidence that the governor, who recently said we should be ashamed of ourselves because of all of the accidents, I'm sure that once we present this bill, he will sign the bill and find the money so that the state of New York can no longer be ashamed of itself. Let me just point out that this assembly passed this bill last year almost unanimously, so we have nothing to be ashamed of.
I don't think we'd have anything to be ashamed of if we disagree with a bill, but as far as the funding of the study, I think it would be, if I'm not mistaken, I would think your hope is that if we have some findings in the study, and it finds that we need to resolve some issues, there would be more funding involved. So where would the funding, if we do find that there are things that need to be resolved, where would that funding come from?
I think then we'll be back next year at budget time and we can discuss that. But some of the changes that might have to be made might not require a lot of money and might be able to be financed through the railroads throughout the state. For example, what we have seen, at least in my area, is we have design of railroad grade crossings that were designed when the area was a rural area. Today, it's a highly congested suburban area. I have one town supervisor who has looked at the 3 grade crossings we have in the space of about a mile or a mile and a half, and he would like to close 1 or 2 of those. Those would probably cost no money to close those. It's also been estimated, for example, that the distance between a railroad arm that comes down to keep people off the tracks and the track itself mysteriously happens to be about 12 and a half feet. And as best as we can determine, that was the length of a Model T Ford. Today, most cars are 14 feet, 15 feet, 16 feet. So in many cases, it might very well be that all you have to do is move the arm back a little bit. I'm not an expert in this. These are the types of suggestions I've heard. I think we need some experts, whether DOT does it itself or it hires an outside firm. Somebody can come in, look, see how many accidents there are, where are most of the accidents, what's the design, is the design causing the problem, is it careless drivers so that we may have to educate drivers on how to cross railroad tracks. We need DOT's guidance on this. If you look at the bill, it asks DOT to work with the state police, the governor's traffic safety committee, local governments, motor vehicle department, bring everybody together. This is a problem. Let's take a look at it and let's come back with a solution.
Now, have you spoken to the MTA and the DOT on this issue?
I have discussed this with the MTA. The MTA says they're doing their own study, but the MTA does not have all of the railroads in the state, and the MTA is going to be very slow on this, especially given the fact that they're being sued. I tend to doubt they're going to come out with a pronouncement on how to change things while they're in the middle of a major lawsuit.
Well, I've spoken to Mr. Prendergast myself, and he has made it absolutely abundantly clear that he has absolutely no interest in any more grade crossings, building any more. In fact, he'd like to do away with them if possible. He suggested possible overpasses and things of this nature instead of grade crossings. So I guess my concern, and thank you, Mr. Avenatti, on the bill. I guess my concern here is we're talking about taking funding to do a study, which, granted, if there are accidents occurring, of course that's important, but there are accidents happening on a daily basis regarding a traffic accident. We could study ourselves into oblivion, but if we're going to spend this money, we're going to end up taking money from the DOT. DOT's already fighting to get, whether it's CHIPS funding or other funding, to fix infrastructure problems all over the state. We've got crumbling bridges and roads that are falling apart. So then we're going to take the money from that to do a study. Then when we do the study, we're going to make improvements to something that the MTA is already saying they want to get rid of. So I just don't see the point of spending this money and tapping into the money from the DOT, which could be used again to improve our infrastructure, put people to work. I don't see the need to use this funding and take the funding from them to do this when we're moving away from the grade crossings to begin with. So for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I myself will be voting against this bill, and I urge my colleagues to consider doing the same. Thank you.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. Mr. Buckwald to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this bill to conduct a study of improving railroad grade crossings across our state, there was a request for a number related to accidents. And to that I say 7. 7 people who died last year when the Metro-North train crashed in Valhalla because a car was on the tracks. 1 driver and 6 passengers, as well as dozens of people on the train who were injured. Those are the numbers that matter. And the response should be absolutely, the study should be the least we're doing. And I want to commend the sponsor of this bill, Mr. Abenanti, who represents Valhalla. I have the distinct honor of representing many of the communities who were served by that train, and 4 of the passengers on that train were constituents of mine. We should have passed this bill last year. We did pass this bill in the Assembly. The state Senate should be passing this bill forthwith, and we should be getting started on this study and doing whatever we can, whether it's low cost or more, to make sure that the roads and trains of this state are as safe as possible. So I urge every member of this body to vote in the affirmative. That's exactly what I'm doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Zambrowski.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. This is a good bill. I want to thank the sponsor, and probably one that's long overdue. Obviously, we've had some devastating crashes in parts of the state. In my district, thankfully not as devastating, but we routinely have cars that pull onto train tracks, and they tend to be in the same ones. And it's because oftentimes the sight lines are obscured, there's a road just after it, there's restaurants or other retail establishments, and it's those that I think that we can focus on and do a study in what can really be done, because we're going to have more tragedies in other parts of the state. So I want to thank the sponsor. I think it's a good bill. It's one that's going to save lives. So I'll be voting in the affirmative and concur to all my colleagues. Thank you.
Mr. Zambrowski, in the affirmative. Mr. Levine.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Interesting statistics, and the statistics substantiate the need for the study that this bill would dictate. So, from 2000, there have been over 105 accidents on the Long Island Railroad crossings since 2003. And in last year, 73 people were killed nationally at the crossings. I think the bill simply says we have to have a greater consciousness of what goes into protecting our citizens at these grade crossings. I have no doubt that the head of the MTA would like to do away with them. This bill will provide the necessary first step to reaching that goal. I'm happy to vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Levine, in the affirmative. Mr. McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to rise and say that I agree with the first speaker on this bill, because I have also dealt with MTA, and it was just mentioned a moment ago by my colleague about the Long Island Railroad, and they do have several grade crossings, but recently, only 3 weeks ago, I met with the president of the Long Island Railroad, and they are preparing. Their goal is now to eliminate all those grade crossings and either raise them or go under the roadway to eliminate accidents. MTA, the rest of the MTA system, is not prepared to do that yet, but I think the problem is that the drivers of the cars. That's the problem. And that one incident that's cited in the bill, that woman went right on the tracks. And I think that the driver has some responsibility also, so I will be voting in the negative.
Mr. McDonough, in the negative. Ms. Peoples-Stokes to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to explain my vote. I want to commend the sponsor of this bill. I think it's important for us as representatives to try and do things that are preventive sometimes. I mean, we can't always react when there is an accident. If it's possible to do any proactive things, I think it's a good idea. As you know, Mr. Speaker, our communities are becoming more and more often having rail cars coming through them that are carrying back-end oil. And it's a very explosive product, and it just makes sense to do the kind of studies on our existing rail to make sure that they're capable of carrying these types of oils. A lot of places that these commerce trains are traveling through are neighborhoods and communities where people live. There haven't been any really major incidences of back-end oil exploding in New York State, but there certainly has in Canada. And so I want to again commend the sponsor of this legislation and hope that while they're doing this study, that they will also look at the fact that we have these very often trains coming through communities that are carrying explosives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will withdraw my request, and my vote is in the affirmative.
Ms. Peoples-Stokes in the affirmative. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 108, noes 16.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we could take up calendar number 129 and page 14 by Mr. Weprin.
Clerk will read.
Assembly Number 2824A, Calendar 129, Mr. Weprin, an act to amend the election law.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. I think we turned Mr. Whitman's later. He wanted to explain the vote. There is a God, and he's merciful. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 111, noes 15.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask you to go to Ms. Schimmel for the purposes of an announcement.
Ms. Schimmel, for the purposes of an announcement.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there will be a majority conference in the Speaker's conference room immediately.
Immediate majority conference, Speaker's conference room. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. Could you also go to Mr. Crouch for purposes of an announcement?
Mr. Crouch, for the purposes of an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There will be an immediate Republican conference in the parlor.
Republican conference in the parlor immediately. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I now move that the House stand at ease until the conclusion of party conferences.
House will stand at ease.